Dear Joris, thank you very much for accepting my invitation for this interview. You are a bass player, a composer, an arranger, a producer, an educator, and a husband and a father, maybe even an uncle. And you are the head of the jazz department of the Prins Claus Conservatorium here in Groningen in the Netherlands, I think since 2001?
That's right.
Yeah. There you initiated the program New York Comes To Groningen, which is a great and huge success. Please explain how you became the head of the jazz department here and how you initiated this very special study program. What inspired you to do that?
Well, I was already living in New York for about 9 years or so, because I moved there on January 1st, 1992. So when I got in contact with the conservatory, I proposed them to bring, I said, okay, I can do it, but I want to bring all my friends from New York and teach there. I wasn't sure if they were into it, but they were open enough to do that. And the way I thought about it is that in jazz music, we study the jazz language, and we don't really. It doesn't really matter what instrument you play to speak that language. I mean, of course, there's the technical part and instrument-specific things, but the language itself, whether it's bebop or free jazz or funk or whatever, there's a certain thing that you can grab from everybody. From if you're a bass player, you can learn from a drummer or from a saxophone player or from a piano player. If you talk about harmony, phrasing, and etc., that kind of thing. So it doesn't matter what instrument your teacher plays. So then, if we bring one person every week from New York, that person can teach the whole student body, not specifically his or her own instrument. And we did that in New York, where I was teaching as well already. So I just copied that idea basically for Groningen. Yeah.
And I like that idea.
Yeah, it's also of course New York is some kind of dream for everybody to because a lot of great musicians come from there. The history of the music it's very important for that, and still today, like a lot of new things are developing there, and it's really a melting pot and a center of inspiration for jazz music. So everybody wants to go there, but it's not easy to go there, and especially not to go there and study or something. It's expensive, and it's So I thought, well, if we bring New York to Groningen, then it's a great way of exporting all this knowledge and musical approach, and introduce that to somewhere in the middle of Europe. Like, I don't see Groningen as away from, like some people in the Netherlands, they think it's pretty far from Amsterdam, right? But it's like 2 hours. It's the same from Brooklyn to New Jersey. So.
Good. Well,
yeah.
you studied at the conservatorium in Hilversum.
Yeah, that's right.
And you graduated in 1991. Please tell me why you became interested in the acoustic bass, the low sound universe, which in fact is it, and what you learned in Hilversum the most, and who were your mentor. Maybe you can tell me a little bit also about that.
Yeah.
Someone who was important for your first inspiration during your study.
Yeah, well, my teacher there was Victor Kayatu, who passed away last year, I think. He was a big influence for me because his teaching style would be, he would just play with me. He would play guitar. He would play guitar with like three fingers. That's all. What he played was so clearly. I could just record the lessons and transcribe everything he played and copied it on the bass. That was a big influence because he played kind of in the style of Barney Kessel and Jerry Christian and that kind of stuff, like Wes Montgomery, very swinging and clear. It was very clear for me to understand how you approach chords and improvising over chords. So that was a good base for me to start with. And so I kind of became sort of a bebop player, which I no longer see myself like that, but it was very solid bass, like to get the harmonic approach and everything. At the school at that time, it was an interesting time. All the teachers were working in the radio and TV, and they brought us sometimes with them to the studios to see how that works, and they really were focusing very much in the school on the craftsmanship, and it should be really, if you need to play some TV jingle, it has to be perfect, you know. So like as far as instrumental skills, it was very high level, and I had a great time there. And a lot of my friends who were in class with me, like ear training class and theory class, they are now kind of stars, like in local stars here in the Netherlands, like Benjamin Herman and Michiel Borslap, Julie Honing, Denise Jana, all these guys, Alain Buwalda, all these guys we hang out all day long in the school together, so it was a really fun time.
Yeah. But what did inspire you to become a double bass player?
All right, yeah, I forgot that part of the question. That was before that, of course, before I went to the school, and somehow, I mean, I cannot explain it why, but I always hear the low register of the music that just inspires me. Like I hear I hear the bass line. I don't hear on Broadway. That melody stuff, I don't really hear it, but I hear the bass lines, you know. So, and that's not only in that funky music, but in jazz music, everywhere I hear the bass lines, and it's just so natural for me. Like it's actually a little bit hard for me to memorize melodies and lyrics and stuff like that, because I'm so focused on the rest, you know. Yeah. So then I picked up the bass, you know. That was like really what I kind of, there's nothing else for me that works. So actually today I play drums too. I've done a little bit gigs too, but it's really not a big deal. I mean, just for fun, you know. And piano, I mean, I play a little bit of piano just to understand the harmony and for composing. But bass is just what I feel normal about. And actually, I don't really think about my bass as some holy mystical thing. It's just a piece of wood with steel strings on it, and that's it. You know, it's like doesn't matter which bass I play, or it's just a thing that I use to express myself.
So you are a natural bass player. So it's in your nature. It's a genetic situation in you.
I played clarinet for a year, but I really didn't like all this stuff in my mouth, and that was really not for me, you know. Yeah.
Okay. Well, as a double bass player, you get a huge instrument, but it's only with 4 strings.
Yeah.
Somehow the double bass is the big brother of the cello and the very huge big brother of the violin. And most of the time you play with your hands and with your fingers and with your thumbs, but also you play with the bow. Do you feel double somehow with this double bass?
No, I feel double with the electric bass, because I play electric bass as well, and actually 5-string too sometimes. But I feel I'm more like a double bass player who came from electric bass and then started double bass, and I don't come from the other side, from the violin or cello. And playing with the bow is not really my big. I don't come from that side, so it was hard for me to actually get that together with the bow, because I didn't have something in my hand between me and the strings. I want to touch the strings, and the same thing is playing with a pick on the electric bass. I cannot really do that because I want to play with my hands. I want to touch the strings with my fingers. There's more connection with electric bass and groove stuff than there is with the bow and the violin and the cello. My mother is a cello player though, but she started after I already played bass. She started later in her life. Yeah.
Okay. Well, can you tell me how you train your fingers and hands and arms to be able to continuously work with these very thick strings that are connected with this very huge wooden body? And do you also experience pain sometimes?
That's a good question, because the only way to avoid pain and to keep yourself trained is to play a lot. So, and actually, sometimes people ask me like, so why do you play so many gigs all the time, all year long, like week in, week out? And the answer is like, well, if I stop playing for a couple of weeks, my calluses go off the fingers and I have to start all over again, and then it starts to hurt and the muscles feel stiff. So even sometimes I play little gigs for not so much money and not so, I could have stayed home and, but I want to do it because of that physical part. Like, you don't go in your practice room and play 3 hours like full speed by yourself, that doesn't work. Maybe you can do it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but then doing a gig really helps me to stay in shape. Yeah.
Okay.
I used to, maybe you can add to it, I used to have much more problems with blisters, especially if you play somewhere in a nice resort with a swimming pool, and then you hang out in the swimming pool and every night you play, and then the sweet water really hurts the calluses. But if you swim in the sea, the salty water heals it. So swimming in the sea is great. If there's a pool and the whole band hangs out in the pool, except me, I have to stay away from it. And so I used to sometimes go get blisters, and then I would go in the break, pop the blister with. I would go with a lighter or matches and a needle to the toilet, and people were like, "What's she doing with a needle and a lighter in a toilet?" But it's nothing strange. It was just a blister. Yeah.
Well, you also play the double bass left-handed, right? How does this work actually? Did you change the strings on your instrument like left-hand guitar players do?
Yeah, I came to play the acoustic bass from the electric bass. I went into when I started to play. I just went to the store and I said, "I want to buy electric bass." And the guy said, "Are you left-handed or right-handed?" I said, "Well, I'm left-handed." So then you should buy this one. And he pointed out the left-handed electric bass, and I bought it, and it felt okay. I tried the right hand and the left. It didn't really matter, but then I was like, okay, let's buy the lefty because I write with the left hand, and then I was stuck with it. Like after 2-3 years, I switched to acoustic bass, and it was too much to go from this to this. Like from this to this, it's the same thing, But from this to this, it was too much. So I stayed, and I had to actually rebuild the acoustic basses. All the basses that I play are restrung, and also inside you have to change everything. Open up the bass, glue it back together. So it's kind of a drag, but
okay.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Well, you also play your instrument, your double bass, with a very special technique. I saw this many times already. Can you please explain this technique, how you got there into this technique, and why this technique works that good for you?
Well, actually, I think that 99% of the time I use a pretty standard technique, but I also use my thumb sometimes. Maybe that's what you refer to.
Yeah.
And I use that sometimes for effects, special effects, like to play funky on the acoustic bass, or to play like short notes or more softer or muffled notes, or it's kind of cool to have a different texture of sound available. So I use that. On my YouTube channel, I have this little video where you can see that how I do it. Yeah, but most of the time I just use my fingers. I don't use the thumb. Actually, the thumb technique came from my teacher, where I was talking about him with Victor Creato, and he was doing it. He pretty much only used the thumb all the time. That was his style on the bass. And he did it because his mother didn't like him to practice, so he did very softly in the corner with the thumb. That's how and he got really good at it, and then that was all he did. So I copied it from him, but I only use it for certain things. I don't use it all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, while playing the bass, especially solos, many players also hum or sing when they play the melody or the solo. Like Niels Henning Ørsted Pedersen is a good example, I think. Do you like this too, and what is your opinion about that?
I would like it if I could, but I can't. I tried it at home in front of the mirror and stuff like that, but I get confused. And I can do both things. I can sing the solos and I can play it, but not at the same time. It doesn't really work for me. So, I mean, I don't know. There's no other answer than that. Actually, like there's no need for me to do it. And if you listen to records where I'm in the studio in a small bass room, sometimes you can hear me like breathing and sniffing that kind of stuff in between, but not really singing or humming.
Okay.
So.
What do you think in general? Is this necessary to do? Is this nice to do? Or should people better not do it?
Well, I only can talk about myself. It doesn't work for me, but if someone else feels like doing it, then they can do it. You know, of course, Keith Jarrett became famous of it, and if he goes too crazy, then it disturbs me sometimes a bit. But as a listener, but
yeah.
I mean, it comes straight out of the heart from him, so it works for him, but not for me.
Okay. Well, in the age of 29, that was 1992, I think, you moved to New York, fulfilling a big dream for you, that was starting a music career in the Big Apple. Why was that so important for you to do, and what difficulties did you experience in the beginning?
Yeah, well, when I arrived there, it felt right away like I'm home. It felt finally. Everybody here thinks the same way about music as I do, and it felt so natural. Like, why did I live for 29 years in Europe? I should have, maybe this is where I'm really home. That's how it felt. And actually, it wasn't my plan to move there or to have a career there. It just happened because my plan was to stay for 4 months. I got a scholarship for 4 months, and after the 4 months, I didn't even use half of the money because I just didn't spend so much money, and I started making money with gigs. People called me for gigs, and then I just thought, well, why should I go back? The money is not finished. Let's see if I can stay a little longer, and then before I knew, 25 years passed.
Yeah. Can you maybe you have some stories you want to share from the beginning time, what maybe surprised you about the maybe easy living that moment in New York?
Oh no, it was not easy.
It was not.
No.
But maybe easy to meet people.
It was easy to meet people, definitely, but I mean financially and the circumstances and the small apartments with roaches, that was not easy. But it was easy to meet people because people, I think in general in New York, it's still like that. Like the first gigs I got were all from bass players who just had so many gigs, they had too many gigs, so they needed another bass player, and then they called me. And it was not really a competitive thing as far as the work situation. It was more a friendly environment, and And if you know, they figured out like, oh, this guy can kind of play, so let's play. Let's you know, what's your phone number? And at that time we had beepers, or actually even before the beepers, kind of started around that time. It started to have beepers, and but definitely we had like voicemail service, that kind of stuff. So you could leave a message like, I need a bass player, and then I call you back. And we also did a lot of sessions at people's houses. That was kind of normal thing to do. Like we always did that, and that's how. When in beginning time, I met, you know, became friends with Braden, Chris Potter, Joe Fram, like to mention some tenor players, and also with Andy Watson, drummer, and Joe Farnsworth, and Peter Bernstein, and Brad Melda, the all guys, Jesse Davis, all guys that are kind of famous now, and we were just, you know, young guys, Tyler Mitchell, we were all young people just having fun and playing jazz. We hang out at Augie's a lot, which is now a club called Smoke, but at that time it was called Augie's, and the owner was called Augie, August basically, but Augie. And he lost all his money with gambling. It was a mess. But anyway, it was a good time at that time. Yeah. So it was a very inspiring time. We hang out at Bradley's. Bradley's was an after-hours club where all the musicians came after their gigs. So you would sit at the bar, and then maybe on the left side, like George Benson was sitting there, and Randy Brecker on the other side. And I'm like, hey guys, who are you? Like, well, I'm a bass player from the Netherlands. So it was easy, it was fun, and very inspiring time.
Yeah. Well, really in the beginning also you recorded an album as a leader together with Don Braden.
Right.
He was also a leader, so it was kind of Don Braden, Joris Teepe quartet. Yeah. Can you tell me how you met and what worked so fantastic for you both that you decided to play together, and you are still playing together, even now after 27 years. Yeah. So you're very active in performing together, recording together.
Well, we met around that time in the scene in the very beginning, and immediately we felt like, wow, the way you think about music and the way I think about music is very compatible, and we kind of inspire each other. Like he has a very rich harmonic sense and ideas, and he has a great memory of, like, he looks at the music once and then he knows it for the rest of his life. Like, he'll never forget it again. So I'm not like that. So that's inspiring for me. And he's a very hard worker. We would be on the road in a van, and he would be writing music, and that same night we would play it. You know, he would just literally, in a little keyboard with headphones, he was sitting in the van, and I was just looking at the cows and the streets. I was like, man, I'm wasting my time. So it was really inspiring to be around him. And I guess the same way it felt for him being with me. Like I was very creative, like a kind of opposite personality, which worked great. Like we have totally different background. He's from like the south of the United States, like black family and all different culture, and I'm from white European. Like it couldn't be more contradictory, but we became really great friends and inspire each other all the time with our ideas and creative stuff that we put to, you know, bounce each other off. So that's nice to meet somebody like that. And that first record, I mean, it took me a long time to actually, all the records I made after that, I was like, well, this is pretty good, but the first one is actually, you know, it's hard to make one better than that. Maybe later on, like maybe the last maybe 7-8 years, I started to make records that I think maybe even better than that. But I'm very proud of that first one. It was also recorded live to 2-track, all one first take or second take, and that's it. No mixing, you know, no editing. Boom, That's it. Tom Harrell on trumpet and Cyrus Chestnut, Carl Allen on drums. Cyrus was the piano player, so
Yeah. Sounds amazing.
You heard it?
I heard pieces of it. Yeah. Not the whole album. Yeah. Well, also somehow very soon after your arriving in New York, you met the drummer Rashid Ali.
That's not so soon actually. That was like maybe 8-9 years later.
Yeah. But still you were new in the scene. Somehow.
9 years. I was kind of in the scene already, kind of establishing myself by that time. Like maybe, actually, it's also a little side story. It's kind of funny. Like when I was in New York for about 3 years, I felt like, oh, now I'm in New York. I'm kind of 3 years already. I'm a kind of New Yorker. And I talked to a friend of mine, a big, great bass player, Peter Washington, and he said like, no, man, it takes you like 7-8 years. And then, you know, you really feel like you're part of the scene and you're a New Yorker. And he was right. Like, after, I was very disappointed when he told me that. But then I realized, like, maybe 4 or 5 years later, after that conversation, I was like, yeah, now this is different. Because then you feel like what it is to really be a New Yorker, be established, working and living there, and, you know, that's just your world. And it's not like in the first few years you still feel like you're actually a European living in New York. You're not a New Yorker. So it's a different feeling.
Yeah. Well, to come back to Rashid Ali.
Right, oh sorry.
Well, he was the last drummer who played with John Coltrane.
Yeah.
So he was first added next to Elvin Jones, and when Elvin left, he was the only drummer. And we recorded 2 albums with Coltrane. That was Meditations and Interstellar Space.
Mm-hmm.
Interstellar Space was recorded 1967, just before Coltrane died. But it was published 7 years later for the first time, 1974.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me where and how you met Rashid Ali first, for the first time.
Yeah. That's a funny story also, because I met him at his own house, in his basement, in his studio. And the trumpet player who was playing with him, his name was Jemani Smith at the time, and he and I met at some jam session and some gig. And he was like, hey man, you should come down to play with Rashid. I was like, really? Wow, that would be great. And so he brought me down there. We went down to the basement. And then he was sitting there in like a little dark basement, and he had this big sunglasses on. I was like, who are you? Like, you know, and I was kind of scared, like, okay, I'm Joris, I'm from Amsterdam. And he said, okay, let's play. So we started playing, and I was like, what are they doing? You know, like I didn't really get it, like the music. So I just started playing a little bit with them, and I didn't know, because that music was kind of new for me. I had a really more bebop background, and but I liked it, and I did my best. And he was really like, wow. He liked me, and from that moment on, like we played together as much as we could, like all the time. And he would invite me for play sessions at his house for hours and hours. And sometimes we would play like 3 hours with no stopping, almost, like just to go to the bathroom and continue. And then we would do a gig next day and play something completely different, nothing that we played the day before. So it's like, oh wow. You know, so it was a very intense period, and I did, we did 2 albums with that band in his studio, and then later we did a live album in Finland, Tampere Festival. And we toured a lot. We toured the United States everywhere, and Canada, and we did also Europe a lot. And sometimes we had tours where we would fly every day. Like you would do a European tour where you play Oslo, next day Madrid, next day Rome, next day, then maybe 2 days London, and then next day in Warsaw or something like that, like amazing. You know, it was really that period of my life was like so intense, super intense. Yeah, but it changed my life.
Yeah. Well, you described it that he triggered you like a major change in vision and on life and music.
Yeah.
So in which way did he trigger you in your life, beside the music?
Well, I mean, not per se in my life as, I mean, he was kind of a father figure for me. He was like, he's the same age as my father. And he was just so cool about the way he was in his life. Like, actually, he was maybe a little bit too cool for me, the way, like he was always smoking a lot of like, you know, not cigarettes but other stuff, and he would be very loose with a lot of things. Like he would say fuck all the time, like motherfucker, like, you know, and that would be like really. I mean, I'm not like that. That's not my personality. He's not the same person as but I look up to him so much as the way he was really totally into the music and just really going for it, and really it didn't matter like if you would play alone in his room or for 2,000 people in an open air concert or something. It's the same thing. It's like he would go for it completely, and that was he was just really inspiring me completely, and it doesn't matter that it's music or any kind, as an artist maybe, not as a musician, but as an artist, the way he was always looking for some kind of way to how can you say that, to looking for the boundaries and never go for the easy way. He would just go for it and see where it ends, and it doesn't matter if also he would sometimes be like we would play a tune and he would play a drum solo, and he would play a really long drum solo, and we were just the rest of the band was just checking it out, like, wow, what's he playing now? And now he goes there, and then he goes there, and then like after 10 minutes, which is really long, you know, then he would be, okay, guys, come. We had to come back, and we forgot what tune we were playing because we were just so inspired by him. He didn't really need a band, just by himself playing drums was already so interesting. But you know, so yeah, this like it changed my life. I think it was more about the way how he emotionally how he approached the music that way, and not technically so much. Although he had great technique too, but yeah, so that made me thinking about myself in a different way.
Yeah. Well, as a bass player, your connection with the drummer is very important.
Yeah.
So you really need to have a very good connection.
Right.
Please explain this in general first,
Mm-hmm.
and especially your drum and bass connection with Rashid Ali,
Right.
because I think that was also very specific.
Yeah.
What did you experience with him, and what did you learn especially in this special connection, drum and bass, with and from him?
Well, I played with a lot of great drummers, luckily, in my life, and actually, you know, I got so lucky with that. I never played with Art Blakey, but with a lot of others like Victor Lewis and Billy Hart, and I mean I can't go on and on with names, but that's not about it. But it's what I want to say about that is that I know what I want from a drummer. I know if I would be a drummer, I know how I would play. I would kind of, you know, I like Gene Jackson. I would play kind of like him in a way, but in another way, I would also be like Matt Wilson or like Billy or like Tane, or you know, somehow Louis Hayes, all those guys that I played with. I kind of feel like, okay, I can really get it what they do, because I studied them. I know how they play and how it feels to play with them. So that then you can really feel them and be really connect with them. And I think if you if I would play, just say like, okay, this is how I play the bass, and you guys just have to follow what I do. That's not how it is. You have to kind of find each other, and usually after like 8 bars, I feel like, oh, this is gonna be great. You know, if I meet some new guy and play with him. So now specifically Rashid, it was. His style was completely different than all the other people I just mentioned, and it was much more about the energy and about the way we approached the music was different. It was more about the feeling and the energy, and we really felt that the same way. So. Like he said always like, oh, if Coltrane was still alive, I would still be his drummer. No, if Rashid was still alive, I know I would still be his bass player, because that was a very special connection we had. And after he passed away, I was like, oh, how can I ever have a drummer that I am so close to with, you know, because it felt like that, especially that kind of music we were going for. That's not possible with someone else, and it's true. It's not really possible with someone else, because it was his personality really. That's not so much the drummer Rashid Ali, but the person Rashid Ali. So you know, every person is unique. So, but you know, I got a very. I think I became a stronger person because of that. So that helps. You know, if you. It's the same thing, like if you have a conversation with different people who are all very, have a lot to say to each other, and they're listening and they're talking to each other, then it becomes interesting to watch on TV, for example, like on a discussion. But if someone is not very strong as a personality, then there's not much to watch, or the conversation is not so interesting.
Yeah, but can you describe a little bit more how the connection was between you while you were performing?
On the bandstand?
Yes.
Yeah. It's hard to describe because it's music, but sometimes he would say like, okay, we're gonna play as fast as we can. Like it doesn't matter like what notes or what chord changes or if it's just fast. That was the only direction he gave, and we started to play fast, and then we played like 15 minutes as fast as we could until you drop dead, basically, you know. But the energy coming from that was interesting, and the audience that they could feel that. It was so intense. It's like, oh my God, you know, we never heard that before, but it's not always. It wasn't always free. We also played tunes and some kind of melodies, or like Ornette Coleman kind of style, like, you know, with certain melodies and things like that. But he would be. He wouldn't talk too much about the music. He would talk about Coltrane a lot, but not about what he wants from us. But he would show us in a musical way. And you know, you feel naturally where it's going. Like he was a leader. So he didn't really. Yeah, he wrote some music. He wrote actually some of the tunes that he wrote are on my new CD now. Yeah, but we didn't play those tunes so much. We did a lot of James Blood Elmer compositions, which was who was his neighbor in the same few houses down in the same street in Soho. And we would play his tunes a lot, and they are kind of free-ish kind of melodies that you can take it everywhere. Yeah, super inspiring time. So, yeah.
Good. Well, Miles Davis punched John Coltrane in his face. And John Coltrane then left the whole period with Miles without even punching back. And when Rashid Ali opened his own club in New York, he got trouble with the mafia there because of cigarette machines and the garbage system. He didn't want to work with them together. And he even was punched and hit through the mafia, but still was able to play afterwards. Well, aggression and fights, even drugs, happened a lot in musicians' life and even today. How did you solve problems around aggression and drugs in bands maybe you were involved?
Well, I was never really in aggression, but I saw a lot of racism, and that disturbed me a lot. I'm kind of the guy who, when I see trouble, I go away from it, and I don't want to be. I'm not the guy who, okay, let's fight. You know, I walk away, and I feel bad, but the next day I feel okay that I did it, because, you know, getting involved in a fight is not gonna help anything, not for me and not for anybody. But yeah, I've seen some weird situations. Not so much drugs, actually. Not so much or alcohol or drugs, but more, I think more the racism and the disrespect that people have for artists or for musicians. And sometimes reversed racism too. Like, I was the only white guy in the band with Rashid, and they thought I was the manager. You know, it's like, who are you? Are you the manager? I said, no, I'm the bass player. Oh, sorry. You know, it's like, yeah, it's weird. So actually, one time the whole band got arrested at London Heathrow Airport. Do you know that story? So we arrived at the airport, and I had a European passport, so I went through easily, and I'm white, and I had just a computer with me. And then they came, they all had like this, Rashid had this Muslim thing on his head, and they were asked for questioning, and then they found out that something was wrong with our work permit for I think we did Ronnie Scott's, or no, we did the pizza club there in London. And so they said, okay, you gotta go, and they took them into a, like, not really a prison, but along Heathrow you have certain area where they don't chain you on the hands, but you're locked in, and you had to take off the shoelaces seriously, and they were like sitting next to some other criminals for hours, and I just, you know, I was the white guy, so that felt really bad. And we couldn't play, we had to cancel that gig that night because they got released. I think the way it got released is because the managing director of London Heathrow Airport, the main guy from the airport, he saw the names and he was like, Rashid Ali, man! Like, he was a jazz fan, so he's like, release him, you know, so that's how they got, yeah, they got out that way. So I was just waiting in my hotel room for like 6 hours until they came. But anyway, yeah, so I've seen a lot of weird stuff, but I've never been involved personally. Like, you know, sometimes I was the only white guy in the band in Haarlem also, and then I wanted to go out in the break and buy cigarettes, and people told me like, no, I'll go and buy the cigarettes for you, you stay here, you know, so that kind of stuff, but I try to stay away from it, yeah.
Okay. Well, you are living in Amsterdam, I think?
Right now, you mean?
Yeah?
Yeah, kind of, yeah, mostly, I still have my house in New York.
Yeah, and you live also in New York at the same time.
Right.
So you live in two worlds at the same time.
Right.
Where do you feel home,
In New York.
In New York.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with lots of traveling, even for performances abroad? I mean, you are many times in the air or wherever. How do you use these many hours in airplanes, for example? Do you compose there, or what are you doing then?
It's actually nice because you have to turn off your phone and Wi-Fi, and so it's like a meditation and resting time for me. And you know, I watch the movies sometimes, but not so much. I try to relax and sleep and think about stuff, and yeah, it's good. I like it. And I went to New Zealand recently. That was really long, like 48 hours traveling or something like that. But the maybe difficult thing is that I travel with my left-handed bass. That's always a drag. But I have a folding bass now, so it's okay. But the traveling itself, yeah, I like it. It's not. I don't like it per se, but I mean I deal with it, so it's fine. Sometimes I do compose on the plane. Yeah. And then when I land, I gotta run to a piano to see if it's what I wrote, if that really works, Yeah.
Okay. Well, New York City was first a Dutch settlement, and it was called New Amsterdam, and that was in 1624. Of course, this is a long time ago, but still the city has a lot of Dutch names inside today's life, like Harlem was named after a Dutch city, or the Broadway means the Brede Weg, the broad way, or Brooklyn comes from Breukelen. Greenwich is coming from Groenwijk, the Green Village, or Coney Island comes from Konijnen Island, which means Rabbit's Island. And Long Island had Lange Island, so the Long Island. How much do you feel Dutch in New York with all these names and this history inside? Is New York life like a Dutch life? Is it similar?
No, not at all. Flushing is Vlissingen, by the way. But no, it's not. I don't feel that there's any connection anymore with the Dutch history, except for the names but there's more English heritage, I think. That the language, obviously, they speak the same language. It's just too long ago. I think the whole. For New York, I feel like half of New York is like Spanish language, almost, or half. I think maybe it's much more in Florida, but in New York, there's a lot of people who speak Spanish, and it's really a melting pot. There's 300,000 Koreans, for example, and there's maybe a few hundred Dutch people who live there, compared to 300,000 Koreans. So to say like, oh, this feels like Dutch here, no, it's not really. No. I've been the only Dutch musician for years and years too. There's maybe a couple more, but I mean in the jazz world there's a few, but there's many more Italians or Brazilians living in New York in the jazz scene. I'm in the jazz scene basically, so that's my New York. I mean, it's probably different if you're a businessman or have a different career or are there for a different reason. But in my world, which is the jazz world, I don't see any Dutch thing in there. I'm the Dutch guy. If you Google like Dutch musician in New York, jazz musician, then you usually get to my name first.
Okay. And what do you like the most today about your life in New York?
Well, I guess the fact what I said before, like I feel home there. I feel like in the music, I feel like the way people think about jazz and about swing and about the importance of the history of the music and the whole thing just fits completely with how I think about jazz. So I feel really home in New York at that part. Like professionally as a musician, I feel home. As the New York life and maybe American life, there's some things I'm not so proud of. Like the whole political situation now is ridiculous, and also I think I feel like it's very old-fashioned. America is like a second world country, basically. The way the wealth is distributed between the big gap between poor and rich, the racism, but even the conditions of the streets and the public buildings, you know, and a lot of things is about money. If you have lots of money, it's fun. If you don't have money, it's a drag. You know, Americans, they have like 3 days vacation per year. There's a lot of things that are not so nice about America. Sorry, guys, but still, there's the music and I think the energy and the climate also. The weather is killer. It's great. The weather. I love the blue skies and the cold winters and the hot summers. I like that a lot.
Do you ever experience silence?
That's a great question. So my compliments for that question. I should. I wish I could, but I have a hard time because there's always music in my head. If I'm in a completely isolated room, silent, then I still hear music in my head. So sometimes when I'm reading a book and really concentrate on something else, then I cannot get away from that. And then I don't experience silence, but I can experience peace. So that's good. But
Okay.
Silence, nice question. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, John Coltrane and his fellow musicians, even his life was a very spiritual one. His recordings even too, like Love Supreme, Impressions, Meditations and so on. What means spirituality for you in relation to music and life?
Also a good question. Well, I think that in a way, for me personally, music gives me an energy and it gives me a really positive vibe that gives me, it makes me strong. And if, for example, I have a pain in my back or a headache, and I start playing with not by myself, but with people, and in a situation where there's a little bit tension with audience and there's a vibe, then it's healing. Like I feel all the troubles go away, like some people sing in music. But I feel like the physical pain goes away, even if I have like feel some sickness in like running nose. It just literally goes away. And if I feel sad or like lonely or whatever problem is going on in my life, at least for a while, I feel like, man, it feels good, and it brings a lot of positive stuff to me, and I guess when you can manage to be a positive person yourself, then you can be a positive force for people around you, and that's what I'm trying to do. I feel like usually very positive in general, like my attitude. So I try to, I'm not like the guy who makes everybody laugh. That's not my style. But if there's problems, like I'm the guy who wants to solve it. So that kind of stuff. I'm not the guy who's like feels depressed, but I try to see like what can we do, or what positive thing can we get out of this. And of course, some things are too big to handle in life, and but then it's good to have some kind of positive energy to fall back on. So yeah, I guess without the music, my life would be harder for myself and for people that I meet in my life. So especially for myself, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I'm not the guy who I'm not really a meditation guy, and yoga guy. I tried all that stuff too, but it doesn't really work for me. Like, be creative and positive and kind and sensitive. That kind of stuff works for me. So, and work hard makes me feel good. So.
Okay. Can you tell me how you understand time?
For music, for playing music, how I understand time? Yeah, I can talk about that for hours.
2 minutes.
So, yeah, 2 minutes. Well, I think that it came pretty easy for me to feel the time in music, especially the beat, to groove and to swing and all that kind of stuff came pretty easy to me, although sometimes I would be in doubt, and especially when I was developing in the early stages of being a bass player, being a musician, I would record myself a lot and listen back to it, and I wouldn't be satisfied and try to improve what I heard. And I still do that. Still when I hear myself, I was like, there's something not so good, and then I work on it. So it's kind of the bass and the feel is kind of natural to me, but the finesse and to be really cool about everything, I had to put some work on it, and the work I did was basically recording and improving, yeah, and be critical. And yeah, another thing about time is, like, if I play with other people whose time is not so strong, then I get a headache or I get a back pain, or there's nothing you can do about it, you know. So so in general, actually, it's always been my goal to play with musicians that are better than me, because then you learn a lot from them. So I like to play with older generation people, like Sonny Fortune, Benny Golson, those guys that I played with. You learn time and the natural way they play. That's their Rashid, of course, like father figures that I look up to. That playing with them was like the best school for me. Well, I go a little bit away from your question, but yeah.
Well, can you tell me what the most beautiful sound for you was or is you ever experienced? And it can be anything.
Wow. Well, I think that it's not music that I was involved with. I think that the most beautiful is like some other music that inspired me, you know, like Love Supreme, you just mentioned it. Like, I mean, listening to that record is just amazing. Like the vibe, and it's so beautiful, and the energy is so beautiful, but also you know, just the classic records that everybody knows, that I mean, to me still, so what, that with you know, the way the bass player plays the melody and then the whole thing, I mean, it's just amazing. Like, now I heard it so many times, it's not really nothing surprises me, because I know every note of that record and every hit on the cymbal and every note on that Coltrane plays or whatever. But for years that was just, you know, I could only I could go wake up with that record and go to sleep with that record. Same with some other records, like Wes Montgomery records that I loved in the early days, and even like more like James Brown. There's a lot of other stuff like Stevie Wonder, that kind of music that inspired me. So I take your question more as to what music inspired me, and that's, you know, that sometimes bands that I played with myself inspire me, but some of the masters they inspire me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what is the secret of your success?
Well, I don't see myself as a success so much. I mean, you know, it's going okay, but I think that I have a sort of a motivation, a positive attitude. That's maybe the secret. Like, I really like to get things done, and I push myself. So I have always many different projects at the same time going on, and I like it that way. I like to work hard. So it's a pretty simple question. I mean, deep question, but maybe a simple answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just recently you recorded an album with your fellow musician friend Don Braden. That's called Earth, Wind and Wonder.
That's actually his record. That's his album, Earth, Wind and Wonder. That's his music. It's Don Braden's quartet, and I just be a sideman.
Yeah.
We also did a record together where we are co-leaders, and that's called Conversations, where we play as a duo and we add different drummers. And that half of the record is, or actually 1/3 is duo, 1/3 is with Gene Jackson on drums, and 1/3 is with Matt Wilson on drums. Two drummers from New York. And we just recorded a next follow-up of that record, which is called Chemistry. And that one is not released yet at this time. So we are now in 2019. And also with two drummers, with Jeff Tane Watts is half of the record and Louis Hayes on the other half.
Yeah, but I want to come back to Stevie Wonder.
Okay.
You mentioned Stevie Wonder already earlier.
Right.
Yeah. So Stevie Wonder recorded an album, a very brilliant one, in 1976, Songs in the Key of Life.
Yeah.
And the opener, the first song of this album, it's a double LP, and the original is called Love is in Need of Love Today.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to ask you what you think about this statement today.
Love is
in need of love today.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great title for music, actually, because there's a lot of, I mean, love and music are very close to me. Yeah, like we as musicians, we spread the music and we spread the love. Sometimes we say it like that, like let's share the love. And like we count off the, okay, who's gonna count off the tune? Okay, let's share the love. You know, we play. So the thing with the love between the musicians and between the audience and the musicians and the emotions in the music, it's very much like love itself, like love in relationships or love between people. So I take your question like that. There's being the connection between love and music, which is kind of the same thing to me. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you were also playing with different drummers in this album you just mentioned with Don Braden. You played there with Matt Wilson and Gene Jackson. How different was that for you to play with each of them? And what did you like about that?
I love both of them, but they are both different people and different personalities, and both very strong and in a different way. So it's like you know, apples and oranges sort of thing. Like, you know, sometimes you like the orange and sometimes the apple, but both of them are really wonderful people and wonderful musicians and amazing, inspiring people and friends. So I can't. There's no way you can choose between them. They're so super. So,
yeah. But in relation to play the bass, We talked already earlier about it. The connection between bass and drums is always very special.
Yeah.
Can you explain with these two, Matt Wilson and Gene Jackson, how the conversation and connection is for you?
Well, it's actually, I can only compare it like if you, if you work together or talk with someone, very nice person this way and another very nice person that way, and it's just a different person, so it's going to be a different conversation. But it's hard to describe in words what the difference is. Maybe I can only just listen to the record. You'll hear the difference. You know what I mean? So for me, it's equally totally interesting and totally different to play with either one of them. Especially live, actually, when you play in front of an audience and the way they approach it is really fun with both of them. I love it. Yeah. Actually, we were thinking about doing some gigs with both of them, two drummers. That would be really interesting too. Yeah.
Oh, that's great news.
Yeah, we haven't done it yet. It's one of the wish lists. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you recorded an album called In the Spirit of Rashid Ali.
Mm-hmm.
And to come back to Rashid Ali, he developed the style known as free jazz drumming, mm-hmm. Which liberates the percussionist from the role of the human metronome. Mm-hmm. So rhythm and melody comes together, including a personal perception. Speed can change even for the band inside all the time. You mentioned it already before. Mm-hmm. So in the 60s, this was a radical breaking with the so-called traditions. Mm-hmm. But today it's a landmark and it's totally normal. Yeah. Can you tell me how free are you today in the way you play and act as a musician?
Well, I think that the more knowledgeable and the more experienced and the more, let's say, you fill up the bag with information and knowledge and experience, the freer you can be, because then you just have more to choose from, and it's always that liberates, because being free is actually being free of rules, but then you have to know what are the rules, or if you want to be free, and if you know a lot of things, then you can it gives you the freedom. Knowledge is freedom, not only in music. I think it's in general in life like that. So I feel like as I get older, I get more free and richer that way. Yeah.
Well, come back to the title and to the album, In the Spirit of Rashid Ali. Mm-hmm. You play with John Batch on drums, yeah. With Wayne Escoffery saxophone, Michael Moore on saxophone, Johannes Anders on saxophone, you on bass, and Freddie Bryant on guitar. Can you tell me how you made the selection to put this band together with these people? What was important for you to have as a quality in each other's to bring it together?
Yeah, well, the idea of this music was to not try to copy the Rashid Ali Quintet, because that band was with different players, and that was Rashid's band. And we actually did a tribute band recording also, that's only available online. It's live at the Zinc Bar with Eric McPherson on drums. But this was more going to reflect my music and how how Rashid Ali influenced me. So you can kind of hear his influence through my music. So I needed to find people who kind of understand the process of what like the music that Rashid Ali, how he touched me and how that changed me. And especially Don Batch was like kind of perfect for that. He's kind of that generation of Rashid Ali almost. He's a little bit younger, but he played with Steve Lacy for years and Archie Shepp and all those guys. So he really understands that where I was going for. So basically, I was just trying to find people who understand where I'm going for, you know, and to make a statement of that music for that. How I was influenced by Rashid. So they were the perfect guys to me. It feels great. I'm proud of the record. I've been playing with Freddie for already 25 years, and with Wayne actually he's a kind of new friend. We only know each other for maybe 3-4 years. So who else? Well, Michael Moore plays only on one tune.
He's the American who lives in Europe,
yeah,
in Amsterdam.
Yeah, and Johannes Enders is very important for the record. I mean, he's an amazing guy, and he fits perfectly for it. Actually, this same band is going to be playing at North Sea Jazz this summer, this July North Sea Jazz Festival.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's invited.
Yeah. Well, you used special compositions on this album. There were compositions from Don Cherry, from Rashid Ali, of course, from Ornette Coleman, Thelonious Monk, Frank Lowe, and yourself.
Yeah.
Why this selection?
Well, some of the tunes that we played with Rashid's band, like Frank Lowe's tune and Ornette. Ornette's tune we didn't play, but Don Cherry tune. We always played that tune at the end of each concert. A kind of a spiritual tune, but the rest of the tunes was just the monk tunes actually were brought to my attention by Freddie Bryant. He did a monk record and he plays a lot of monk music, and so that was his influence. Of course, the Rashid Ali suite with the 5 tunes that I put together, that was just, you know, my statement and my thank you to the master. And so I just, you know, put it together, the repertoire that made it the best way to make that statement. You know, this the Ornette music and my own tunes, they kind of fit with that everything.
Yeah. Well, there are 2 titles, Alphabet and Holland America. These 2 are from you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain them, and what is there a kind of message inside?
Yeah. Yes.
And how important are these titles for you in these compositions?
They're important. Like Alphabet actually I wrote that during, I was teaching at a jazz camp in America, in Connecticut. And I was just writing a tune inspired by the students, and so I called it the alphabet of jazz. It's like basically, you know, you teach them all day long the alphabet of jazz, so that's how the title came from. And with the ensemble, and we actually did a teacher's concert that same night after I wrote it, and we played it on the concert with the teachers, so I could actually check it out, and it worked for me. And Holland America, that tune is kind of, you know, about my own life. Like, obviously, you know, I travel between Holland and America once a month or once every other month almost. So that's, you know, that's kind of the music kind of feels to me like it's American music, and I'm Dutch, so it's kind of a mix between everything that came out of that tune. Yeah. And it's a bass line it started with a bass line and a kind of weird bass line, and that's the base of the tune.
Mm-hmm. And how important in general are titles for you in compositions?
They're important. Yeah, I usually I try to find a title that fits to the. Usually, I write the tune first and then the title. Of course, it's not the other way around. But I try to find a title that sticks with me, that fits. It's like, you know, how you give your children a name or something. After a while, it's just not like, you know, that's the name that you gave, and it sticks with that particular title, sticks with the vibe of the music. So, yeah, they're important to me.
Okay. And can you tell me how you describe in general the message of the spirit of Rashid Ali today?
How I describe
Yeah.
his message?
Yeah. Of this album, or in general the spirit of Rashid Ali today,
yeah,
in you, and what you want to bring and
well,
share with
yeah,
us.
Yeah, I've kind of mentioned that already, I think, but his message that I like to carry and spread is like that, you know, the music has to be coming from emotion and from energy, and not from technical stuff or computers, or it's really an artist behind it, and creative, and maybe for musicians sometimes we are very much thinking about, okay, it has to be from A to B, and it's kind of forced, but the way he was so relaxed about it, he was like, oh, we can go from A to C and then to B, why not? You know, like, let's just experiment with it. So that thing to approach the music that way, I think that's something we shouldn't forget. And that's why I like that's why I paid a tribute to him, because that was what stuck with me after playing with him for 9 years. And I hope that that message is, you know, it's a nice message for people. Hopefully,
yeah.
They.
I have a question about how you compose. What do you need to have in a composition, and maybe what not?
So when I compose music, I really want to look for something unique that. For example, when I maybe I can actually explain it from arranging. When I see a tune that I like, I want to play it in a different way than everybody else plays it, because if you play all blues the same way as Miles Davis, then why don't you just buy Miles's record? It's much better than my record. So if I want to record all blues, I want to do it in a different way. And the same thing with composing. If I try to write something that has never been heard before. It's not something that there's like, oh, there's another tune like that. It sounds like this or sounds like that. So I always try to push the limits to have a unique thing. And often it comes from bass lines that I compose of. But yeah, it's just ideas that actually when I sit at the piano, I never can become a better piano player, because as soon as I sit at the piano, I get ideas of compositions. So I stop practicing the piano, I start writing. That's why I never became a good piano player. And but I think that composing music is something that happens in your head, not with your hands. And I compose a lot of music on a little cheap plastic Casio keyboard, or even without any keyboard, just on the airplane, or in the train, or in my bed, or in the shower, you know. So yeah, you don't need an instrument to compose. You need a lot of fantasy. And I started to arrange a lot. I started writing for big band and for even for a symphony orchestra, for all kinds of different situations. So.
Okay, well, maybe you can also tell me a little bit about another project of you. It's the Joris Teepe Big Band.
Yeah.
How it started, how do you create it, and what you want to bring with it.
It started because I was playing with my quartet, which at the time was Braden on saxophone, Gene Jackson on drums, and David Berkman on piano. And we were invited actually by a symphony orchestra to be the quartet who was a guest for the symphony orchestra. And it's like, wow, that's a great opportunity, but we don't have any music for orchestra, just the jazz quartet. So me and Don decided to write a repertoire, to write actually my compositions for symphony orchestra. He's also an experienced arranger. And so we did that, and we did a couple concerts with that music. And then somebody in the audience heard it and said like, oh yeah, you know, I'm from Romania, and would you like to to do this music with the Romanian radio orchestra? I was like, sure. So a few months later, I got the contract in English, and I saw there like, oh, we are so proud to have you as our conductor. And I was like, what, conductor? I cannot conduct a symphony orchestra. So I got in touch with them, and they said like, well, but if you don't conduct, it's going to be a different fee. It's like, well, it's attractive to earn this fee, but I really cannot conduct a symphony orchestra. And I said, no, it's not the radio orchestra, that's a big band. It's like, really? But I don't have any big band music. All the music we wrote was for a full symphony orchestra with violins and bassoons and all this, the whole thing. So, well, this is our big band, do you want to come? It's like, well, yeah, well, I can conduct a big band, but I don't have any repertoire, so I had like 6 weeks to change all the music, the same tunes again, from orchestra to big band. So we have to think about, okay, so the violins, that can be played by the saxophone section, and that kind of stuff. So we had to rebuild it all. And so I did that, and I went to Romania and did the concerts, and then I flew back to New York with all this big band music with me, and I was like, well, I might as well start a big band now. You know, I have all the repertoire ready. So I got some gigs in New York, and I called the guys to rehearse the music and did the concerts. And then at some point, I had a whole week of gigs in all different clubs in New York. So Monday here, Tuesday there, and so I called the guys like, guys, I got 6 gigs in New York. We could do a tour of big band, but you can sleep in your own bed every night. So we did that Monday through Saturday, and then some of them were in New Jersey, some of them Manhattan, you know. And the last gig was in New Jersey, and then on Sunday there was no gig, so I booked the studio, and that's how we recorded that album. And I called Rashid and I said, man, do you like to play one tune with my big band? And he's like, yeah. So he came and he played one tune on the album. Yeah. So nowadays, I did a few gigs with that band following the years following that recording. But now I'm mostly I'm a guest bass player with local big bands. Like they invite me as a bass. You know, mostly big bands like to have a singer as a guest or a saxophone player, but not a bass player. But so it's kind of different. So sometimes I get to do those projects, or you know, I send them the music and then I come later and we play the concerts.
Yeah. Well, we had already, of course, many big bands and music, like the Peter Herbolzheimer big band. We had Don Ellis and his big band.
Sure.
So what is different about your big band?
Well, I tried to. I think most of my music is not per se big band format. As where you say like there's an intro, then there's the melody, then there's solos, then there's like a special chorus like for the saxophones or whatever, then there's a drum solo and then the head out and then coda. That's usually what you have with a lot of big band music. So I try to write more, maybe the form is maybe more inspired by classical music, where it can go to all different sections and maybe later on the movement can come back. So I thought about to call it Joris Teepe Orchestra to reflect that idea, but I don't know, it was too late. It was already, the CD was already printed as Joris Teepe Big Band. It's like, okay, well, that's cool. So yeah, I'm still interested in keeping that together and doing big band music.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And who will be there in the big band?
Who will be there?
Yeah, who do
depends
you
who's
have?
available.
Yes,
You know,
who do you have in the drum section and the saxophones?
Well, on my CD it's Gene Jackson on drums and John Davis on piano, and the saxophones Dan Braden is on the saxophones, one of them. You know, Mark Gross, Jason Marshall on baritone, and Adam Colker is on tenor. Let's see, we have Mike Mossman on lead trumpet, and Earl McIntyre on bass trombone. These are all kind of New York guys, you know. The whole band is like New York scene guys. So, yeah.
And what will you do next with the big band? Do you plan a new recording?
No.
Concerts?
My next project is in Poland, where I'm invited as a guest conductor with student big bands and semi-professional big bands. They're going to perform our music, and I conduct the band and play with them. So every once in a while I do projects like that.
Okay. Yeah. Can you tell me what is the most beautiful for you to be a musician?
Well, I don't know it any other way. I cannot imagine another job. Like, you know, I studied political science actually before going to the conservatory. Yeah. And so I'm interested, I mean, in politics, and I try to follow what's going on, and I like the interaction between people, but it's not as hip as the way we do it with the musicians, with the audience, and musicians with each other, and the way we are creative and spontaneous, and you know, it really fulfills my life. I'm very happy to be a musician, and I don't know what else to do, like, yeah.
Okay. And can you tell me who you are in private when there is no music around, no business, no activity related to school or music business? Who are you then?
Well, I'm a family man. I like to be with my son and my wife. They're very important to me, and actually they're more important than music. That was when he was born. It was amazing to see that actually someone else is more important than you, and it's all about him, not about me. You know, I don't care whatever happens to me, but what happens to him, that's my life. So we talked about music so much now, but it's all like relative. It's very relative compared to the new life that came into my life, and it was like, wow, that's super hip, you know. So yeah, I think I'm not really a different person in terms of being creative and spontaneous and positive. That's in music and in normal life too. But when there's no business or music going on, then yeah, I like to be with people. I'm not a guy who sits by himself all the time.
you don't have other interests, hobbies, something weird maybe? Are you going fishing or something like that?
No.
Or camping?
No, I don't
Or
know.
hiking?
Life is already so short. I'm too busy I read a book once a year, so I'm not proud of that. I should do more of that stuff, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I thank you very much
Okay.
for this interview.
Great, thank you for having me. Yeah, honor and pleasure. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Great, man. Well, thank you, man. Really cool. It's nice that to have it documented, you know. And yeah, there's lots of stuff to talk about. I can talk for hours more, you know, but this is enough because it's already a lot.
It's okay.
Yeah.